Rasmus Sandin leaves a world championship game after knee-on-knee contact.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this special edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So this news is just breaking now. I was mowing the lawn and my phone was blowing up that Rasmus Sandin was injured at a World Championship game. This is the worst possible scenario that you could possibly think of. If you want to think back on what happened to Tom Wilson in the playoffs a couple years ago, what did that mean for him? That means that he missed almost half of the season, if not more. This is not a good position for the Capitals. We'll talk about that in the show. And then later on, we will talk about what the blue line is going to do in his absence. But just to get it going here, like I talked about, the news was breaking just a short time ago that Rasmus Sandin left the World Championship after knee-on-knee contact by Eyssimont. Eyssimont received a game misconduct and was ejected. Rasmus Sandin is in a lot of pain and has left the game after Eyssimont got him in the knee, writes Stephen Ellis on Twitter. So, just taking a look at this and why this is so unfortunate, as we know at the trade deadline, a few months ago, several months ago here, the Capitals sent out Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway out to Boston. And one of the pieces they got in return was a first-round pick. The Caps, in turn, took that first-round pick and sent it to Toronto to get Rasmus Sandin. As we know, Eric Gustafsson also went out to Toronto. And it looked like a really good move. I think it is a good move. He is a young, solid defenseman. And he, contributed to this team. There were a couple gaffes in his defense. But overall, I am pretty pleased with Rasmus Sandin and the potential of what he means to this Caps team in the future. So to see him get injured in a game like this, kind of makes me mad in a lot of ways. I mean, who is paying his bills? Who is he under contract with? He is under contract with the Washington Capitals, and he got injured in a World Championship game, which I understand has meaning, but it doesn't have any meaning as far as him contractually, who's paying his bills at the end of the day. And he's playing in a game and gets injured through no fault of his own. Knee-on-knee contact by Eyssimont. He was assessed a 5-minute penalty and a game misconduct. But who cares for him, right? The games that mean, for me anyway, they mean nothing. So what does this mean for the Capitals going forward? We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But again, just I guess irritation is the best thing that would describe how I'm feeling right now. As we remember, it seems like this team will make strides and then they get knocked back. Tom Wilson plays great. He gets injured in the first game of the playoffs. Nick Backstrom has a hip resurfacing procedure. There's just, I could go on and on about the injuries. And now let's add a new injury to this list. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't know the extent of his injury anything more than it was knee-on-knee contact and he had to leave the game. But if you take a look at Tom Wilson, when I saw what happened to him against the Panthers, I thought he was going to miss a shift or two and be back in. As it turns out, he did not return for the entire playoffs and missed a good chunk of this past season. So a lot of questions now for the Caps going forward. I guess most notably, how long is he going to be out? If he's going to miss, as much time as Tom Wilson does, then I guess that is going to be a difficult thing. Chris Johnston wrote on Twitter, things you hate to see. Rasmus Sandin hobbled to the Swedish dressing room, grabbing at his left leg during the IIHF World Hockey Championship. Team USA's Mikey Eyssimont assessed a 5-minute kneeing penalty and game misconduct on the hit. And if you see the hit on the ice. It was useless. That he wasn't really involved in the play. It's like he skated over and hit him and then and skated away. I think that there should be a bigger penalty for him considering what happened. And again, that's my biggest thing here is what do the Capitals do going forward? And we'll talk about what the Caps are going to do coming up. So one of the stressful things out there is buying tickets for events in your area, and sometimes those tickets are hard to find. That is why you need Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped over the fun that you'll have. Summer's short. Let's take advantage of this. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, welcome back into this special edition of Locked On Capitals. And to run down to the studio here as soon as I heard that Rasmus Sandin, one of the key pieces of the Capitals, could be missing for the long term and what that means for this team going forward. Make sure and subscribe to Locked On Capitals on all the major platforms and including YouTube for events like this. I got you guys covered all season when it comes to these fluky things like injuries or signings, coaching changes. So make sure and sign up to Locked On Capitals today. So just talking about Sandin here and how unfortunate that this is because you took a look at the blue line and it looked pretty good. You got John Carlson and Rasmus Sandin. TVR got a new deal. And it was very frustrating. Jensen got a new deal. So, and then also Alexiev. So now we're just kind of waiting on Farivarez. We know he's a restricted free agent, so there's some flexibility. I assume that he will get addressed as well this summer. But for Rasmus Sandin, a key piece in the future, let's face it, the Capitals went all in on getting Rasmus Sandin. They gave up a first-round pick to get Rasmus Sandin on this team, and I think that it was a good move. All things considered, I still think it's a good move, but now the questions remain about the extent of his injury. And again, this news is just breaking like 20 minutes ago. I don't know what the future is for him on this team, but a lot of questions. This is happening before free agency in July. So I think add it to another thing on Brian McClellan's list of things to address in the event that he can't return. I mean, let's face it. He said that he wanted to address the blue line anyway, and that was with Rasmus Sandin. So now you're going to have to add a guy that I think they had penciled in for some big minutes. Gone. Gustafson's gone. Dmitry Orlov gone. Some key pieces, even though the team didn't play that well last year, those were still some key pieces that moved out of Washington this last season. Some key pieces that they're going to have to try to scrounge up. Do they have someone? Is Vinny Iorio up for it? Is, Lucas Johansson, something like that? Or are they going to have to go out and free agency and sign a big one? But then, of course, you're going to have to give up someone. So you're going to deplete someone to add someone. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is, we talk about these young players, and if we want an NHL ready player, a marquee name, we're either going to have to give up someone on the big team, or we're going to have to give up someone down in Hershey. And then you're kind of, kicking that proverbial can down the road, especially if it's someone down in Hershey. So a tough position for the Caps. That, again, just to reiterate what I talked about off the top, frustration is the thing that summarizes what I'm feeling above and beyond everything else. Why do they allow these players who are contractually signed to the Capitals organization play in these games that they're not going to pay the difference? You think that the World Championship League hockey, they're going to end up paying the Caps the difference if Sandin misses next season? Of course not. And sometimes these players never come back 100%. You could have ostensibly screwed up a key piece to this team, possibly forever. Sometimes these guys never come back from these injuries 100%. I know there's a lot of progress, and Tom Wilson seemed to be doing pretty good, but even he said that he skated gingerly on his knee because he wasn't used to putting all his weight on it. And we don't know. We don't know what kind of, everyone returns from injuries different. How is Rasmus Sandin going to return from this injury? It is a scary thing, that is for sure. But I got you guys covered all summer on Locked On Capitals. If there's any more news, I'll record another episode here coming up here. But as of right now, that's all I know. It was a world championship game, knee-on-knee contact. He left the game. Not looking good for the Capitals. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When you're done listening to this podcast, head on over to Locked On NHL. They got you guys covered 5 days a week when it comes to Stanley Cup coverage. Also, if you're a fan of DC sports, make sure and check out Locked On Nationals, Commanders, and Wizards. We got you covered with DC Sports. All right, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you next time.